He said very clearly that India and the rest of the world is being blackmailed. And Niti Aayog is the think tank for the government of India. The two figures don't match. Almost reckless statements are being made by ministers. Are they being pressured by the party? Any kind of pressure is a kind of blackmail. Hi, this is Bhaskar from Bhaskar Ki Business Baatein. It's a channel that focuses on policy analysis. It's a channel that sometimes brings you conversations with business and investment gurus. And it's a channel that sometimes brings you a business story that you may not have heard anywhere. This time, we are going to talk about policy. It's a policy about India. It's a policy which talks about whether India is being blackmailed. Blackmailed is a very strong word, I know. But I'm measuring my words very carefully. And the word blackmail comes not from me. It comes from one of the world's most respected external affairs ministers of Russia, Sergey Lavrov. Lavrov was in India in 2023. And there, at a conference known as the Raisina Hill Conference, he was talking about Russia and the international order and the Ukraine war and India. And towards the end of his talk, he said very clearly that India and the rest of the world is being blackmailed. Listen to this.
Don't forget that you have a bank account in such and such bank, and don't forget that your kids go to Stanford. Bluntly. And I'm sure that there are many people in this room who know that this is true.
What did Lavrov say? He said this because he said that India is forced to do things, accept things, because America has learned to blackmail India. Remember, America watches every dollar coming in and going out. Now, whether you're exporting to China or to Mexico, all currencies first converted to dollars and then converted to that currency. And if they are sending you something, it's converted that currency into dollars and then converted to rupees. So America knows any currency going from anywhere to anywhere and can keep records of that currency flow. America has a dossier on every minister and every bureaucrat in India. And as Lavrov said in the conference openly, he says, I know there are people in this audience who will tell you that the Americans have approached them and said, we know you've got a son or your daughter studying in this university, and we know you've got a bank account here. Effectively, much of India's administration and policy-making machinery could be blackmailed. And in the recent past, many things happened. India kept quiet when Indian illegal immigrants were sent back in handcuffs and shackles. Colombia protested, got its way, and did not allow its citizens to be dehumanized in this manner. India kept quiet. At this time, when Prime Minister Modi went to the USA to meet Trump, he did things which nobody expected. He agreed to all transactions being in dollars at a time when BRICS is talking about de-dollarization. He agreed to quintuple trade with America. Today, we have got $130, $140 billion of trade. He said by 2030, we'll make it $500 billion. India doesn't have too many things to export to the US. So which means India will continue importing from the US. And that will increase your trade deficit significantly. India agreed to, or kept quiet, to a tariff increase of 25% on automobiles and pharma. Pharma is one of our largest export businesses. And we kept quiet. When tariffs increased for Canada and Germany, both allies of the US got together and said, we will offer counter tariffs. And now there's some discussion going on. Suddenly the EU is waking up challenging tariffs, India has kept quiet. And the big question is India being blackmailed? If you listen to Sergey Lavrov, maybe it is. Why else did India sell away its interests quietly, without a murmur? Would the former External Affairs Minister, the late Sushma Swaraj, have allowed such things to happen? And there is another issue that comes up. You have a situation in India where almost reckless statements are being made by ministers. Are they being pressured by the party? Any kind of pressure is a kind of blackmail. Are they being told that if you don't say this, you'll be in trouble? I don't know. But let's examine two statements before we go on further. You have a funny statement by the Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh, who waxed eloquent about the 4 trillion rupees worth of investment proposals that had come into India. 4 trillion is 4 lakh crores. Nobody talked about how many of these proposals will actually result in actual investment. Leave that aside. He talked about some employment numbers. He said that he could create 1 lakh jobs thanks to these investments. He said he could create 5,000 jobs for every 25 crores of investment. Really? Did you look at the ICOR figures of NSSO? What is ICOR? ICOR is incremental capital output ratio. If I put in 1 lakh into the business, how many jobs will I create? How much money will I make? Obviously, if you're investing money, you have to find out what the output of the money is. NSSO figures say that for every lakh of investment in areas like textiles, agriculture, and a few other sectors, you will create as many as 75 jobs for every 1 lakh. So, for 25 crores, you should be creating 1,87,500 jobs. Where's 5,000? Where's 1,87,000? Something is wrong. And why are the ICOR figures of NSSO different from the ICOR figures of Niti Aayog? Is Niti Aayog trying to minimize the impact of money? That would be unfair, because NSSO is a very influential, responsible organization of the government of India, and Niti Aayog is the think tank for the government of India. The two figures don't match. And I personally would respect NSSO figures more than Niti Aayog's figures, because Niti Aayog is known to use numbers whenever it suits the people in power. So was Madhya Pradesh lying? Was he exaggerating? Was he creating a hype because he had been asked to? I don't know. Look at another statement which did not make sense. The finance minister recently talked about how she would control prices by importing food items to make sure that food inflation was not large. Importing food items? Importing agricultural items? Agriculture, which is the backbone of India, where 50% of India's population is employed or is associated with? Was she unaware that every time you import food grain or cotton or edible oil, it depresses prices for farmers, and the farmers don't grow it next year? And one reason why India's consumption is low is because purchasing power in the rural sector is low, because the government has not allowed them to get high prices. When 50% of India's population sees a reduction in incomes, it is bound to result in reduced consumption, which in turn will mean less demand for industry, which in turn reduces economic growth. Why did the finance minister make these statements? Was she instructed to? Or just take a few years ago, when Piyush Goyal, Minister of Commerce, tried to justify import of edible oils. And look at this chart. India at one time imported only 20% of its requirements of edible oil. Because of an import-oriented policy, today we're importing almost 80% of our requirements. It means every import has hurt farmers. Every import has reduced output from farmers. Every import has reduced incomes for the rural sector. And there's one more issue. India generates about 120 million youngsters each year. As they grow older, they come into the 14 to 18-year-old category, which is ripe for employment. That is the number of jobs we have to create each year if you have to satisfy the population growth in our country. You have a demographic dividend? Fine. But the dividend means nothing if they can't get jobs. You need 120 million jobs to be created. Assuming 50% of them don't work, either because they're homemakers or because they've got a family business, even then you'll have to take half the number of jobs that India has to create. What is 1 lakh compared to this number? You wax eloquent about a number that means nothing from a highly populated state. This is why I'm convinced, after hearing Sergey Lavrov and after seeing the not so logical statements from ministers, that someone is pushing both India and the ministers to make remarks or to keep quiet when the powers that be want silence, and to make them make statements when the statements may not be actually based on ground realities. India cannot grow if it cannot reckon with numbers first. India cannot grow unless it makes sure that India's interests are protected. What India agreed to with the US could hurt India savagely. And that is why India needs to be very careful and restructure its alignments with countries, with policies, and with the notions of bribery which are now traceable. Thank you very much for watching this channel. And yes, do subscribe to our channel and do click the like button. When you like us, we are delighted because it allows us to grow.